right, now we're going to talk about how to actually build these random forests and these bagged trees in R. So let's go back to the heart disease example that I was doing before. Recall that I'm predicting whether a patient has heart disease from 13 predictors. And so this is a classification example. And so my first step, we're going to do an initial split this time. So I'm going to randomly divide the data in half. I've got 149 training observations, 148 testing. You can tell that from my code because I've got my prop equal to 0.5, so I'm doing a 50-50 split. And it's not exactly 50-50 because 149 plus 148 is my total sample size. It wasn't a perfect split. And then I can pull out my training data here as heart train. I'm going to create a model specification, and so now you'll notice that instead of decision underscore tree, I'm now doing rand underscore forest. But the same as before, I'm still going to set my mode, and so because this is a classification, I'm going to set my mode equal to classification. If I were doing like my baseball example, for example, or the application exercise example where you were predicting number of applications, so you're predicting something that's quantitative, then you would change that mode to regression. There's one extra piece in this model spec that we'll talk about in just a second, mtry. And then I'm going to pipe this into a set engine Ranger. And so that's because Ranger is the name of the package that we're going to use for random forest. So before we were using rpart because that's a decision tree package. Now we're using Ranger because that's a random forest package. Okay, so this mtry here is the M that we were talking about before. And so if we're doing bagging, what do you think we would set mtry to be? So as a reminder, the number of predictors, we have 13 predictors here. And so when we're doing bagging, M is just the total number of predictors. So it's equal to P. So for traditional bagging, we would just set mtry to 13, the total number. So that's what I'm going to do here. So this is my bagging specification. I've got mode equals classification, mtry equals 13, and I set my engine to Ranger. What do you think I would change mtry to if we were doing a random forest? So I'm going to set it to 3 because basically what you do, this is actually the default for the rand underscore forest function, but it takes the floor of the square root of the number of predictors. And so the square root of 13 is, that's not going to be an even number. But you can basically round that down and that'll be what you'll try. So in this case, it'll be 3. So this is my specification. I'm going to do random forest instead of bagging in this case. We know this has a little bit of an improved variance, and so we're going to do that. So I'm plugging in that model specification. I've got my same model here that I'm fitting. I'm using those 13 variables to predict heart disease here. And I'm using my training data to fit this model. And then I can examine how this looks in the testing data. So I can pull out that test data from my split, and I can make a nice confusion matrix to see kind of how well it does. Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and open your application exercise 5 from the last class. And I want you to refit your model as a random forest. And so instead of fitting it using a decision tree, I want you to do a random forest. And then go ahead and knit, commit, and push it, and make sure you have final results pushed to GitHub by tomorrow at noon.